Good Thursday morning. It's the Explicit Measures Podcast again with Mike, Tommy, and Seth. Good morning, gentlemen. How's everybody doing?
Not too bad.
Getting the coffee
Doing
going?
well.
I think Seth and I are tired, but we're doing pretty good.
We're all tired.
I think we're all tired.
Let's be
It was a
honest.
late night for all. I wish I had a good. I'll have to think of a good intro for Thursday. You know, like Happy Tuesday. That's a fun one, but it doesn't work with
Not happy?
no, like the
Thursday.
is what sends it,
The
right?
two is a
And
fun word.
Thursday, it's a th.
Don't like it so much.
I'll have to figure it out.
It is closer to a weekend, so I do like that part of it.
It's true enough.
So
But
this
then it's also closer to that 4-day stretch, and we know Tommy
Well,
suffers.
you saw how
during this
rusty we
time.
were after a week.
yeah, it was,
Goodness.
One of us was, yeah.
Take some time.
Yeah.
I hear
got to
you.
get back in the groove again, get the talking juices going again.
Indeed.
Today's going to be an interesting topic. We're going to try to go through the difference between IT datasets that may be made by the IT team versus a user-based dataset. So we probably should define what these things kind of mean initially here. Like, this is kind of how we mostly do the podcast. We define what we're talking about right out of the gate, and then we kind of get into debating how these things work. So Seth, maybe kick us off with a little bit of, like, in your mind, what would an IT-defined data set look like, and versus a user-defined data set? How would we define, what we're talking about here?
Yeah, I think these are the polar opposites of the organization and who's putting things together, right?
Yep.
IT-led is typically centralized. So if you want to say it's the BI team, are developing their data sets through standardized extract, transform, load processes. There's source systems of data that everything in the organization is coming into, and that's where they're sourcing their data. And a lot of the development of the data sets that they're curating are tested for accuracy, go through many different processes before they make the light of day.
Yep.
Versus the complete opposite part of that, which Power BI supports just as well, is a user-led. So completely unvetted sources of information. They may be using some of the source systems, but they might be modifying the data after it comes out of the source system in some way. So there's kind of unvetted ETL going on. And then it's more untested in a wider context, right? Kind of them doing their thing. It's not like it's all inaccurate, but at the same time, putting it out into the wild without more eyeballs on it or proper QA and that kind of stuff.
I think that's a good definition. There's actually a question that came around kind of talking about IT data sets here. So average nerd dad asks a question from YouTube. What would you consider BI teams? Would you consider a BI team a part of IT or a part of the business? So this is going to be a nothing else.
I think he knows this is a hot topic.
I think he knows it's a hot topic.
There's a button. Well, the topic changed just now. So.
I think it depends on the size of the organization, right? When I say BI team, I'm talking about the central team, that's likely going to be, responsible for a lot of the Power BI roadmap adoption, standards within an organization, the ones building the reports that go everywhere. Depending on how large an org is, right? Like, you could probably have different team similar team
Yep.
in an org. And then it's more of just a perfunctory, team that manages the whole centralization, or maybe it's a group of people, right? But it's ultimately the people that are plugged into the technical systems,
So,
and source datas that are basically creating and shaping the data within an organization for others to digest.
So I think I want to be clear here. Like, there's kind of two. So this is actually talking a lot about. We had Matthew Roach kind of come talk to the user group a couple months ago, and he had this really great diagram. It's like a pyramid. At the base of the pyramid, you have this uncontrolled, kind of free-flowing data set designing, right? So this is like Tommy and Seth just grabbing an Excel document, doing some data, pulling some data out of a system, bringing out Power BI, doing a little bit of data shaping, and boom, I've got a data set. It works for me. And it may be something small that I use or my department uses, but the source is maybe like Excel. So these are widely uncontrolled, and in your organization, I mean, I've been called this a lot of times because of what I've done. Is like, oh, you're shadow IT. Well, I'm not shadow IT. I'm just trying to get stuff done, people. Like,
Yeah.
there's no such thing here. Like, let's not try and make this like, a
Fuck the
versus
superhero.
yeah, or like
Like a Marvel comic.
or like a confrontation between, well, you don't do it how we do it, so we're gonna segment you away, and we can't. I think so. All this to kind of say, like, at the top of that pyramid, you have more controlled data sets. And to Seth's point, that's the stuff that's like, it's got a data warehouse. It's being vetted. There's money being spent to go through the data to make sure that it's like, it's accurate. We can trust the information. And so leadership is buying into those data sets or definitions or whatever that means and saying, these enterprise data warehouse items, there is a team supporting them, and they have like an SLA with them. Some of these user-based data sets, I would say, do not have an SLA. And so when average nerd dad asks, would you consider the BI team a part of IT or a part of the business? I think in a healthy organization, and I'm going to make a broad generalization here because this is probably not for every company. It'll differ for every company. But I feel like in a healthy company, you'll have a BI team that spans both IT and the business. There'll likely be some individuals that are in the IT space providing data sets, and there's probably also some business individuals that are participating. They're not directly getting paid by IT, but they would be considered BI, and they would be maybe in a department or working with the IT BI team to wow, a lot of acronyms there. But they'd be working with them to help build good reporting. I don't know, you guys' thoughts?
I mean, the adoption roadmap supports that, right? That what
Yes.
you're talking about, different
Yes.
teams, whether it's the center of excellence and or what's the other one? It's a great Thursday for this brain. Where you have other individuals integrating with that core team.
Yeah.
I don't like the term IT, right? Because it
Agreed.
has this connotation that it's the guys behind the wall.
Mhm.
I would say the BI team is the engineering team that's closest to these big ETL pipes, and the reason it's more, I would say, significant from the organization standpoint is when something is off, a change impacts many data sources, right? So like that's where that vetting of things goes on. I completely agree. Like a BI team has a foot in both places, right?
Yes.
Or it sits in the business, right? We have to be plugged into the business. We talk to business users all the time because
Yes.
we're building
Yeah.
value for them.
Exactly.
And you also have a foot in the technical spaces where you obviously have to know a lot more around the technologies, supporting them, building things within them that are above and beyond what normal business users use.
Well, 20 years ago, maybe I think it's a more relevant question, but
I agree
why
with you.
now?
That's where I was going to go with it, Tommy.
But to be honest, like now, why can't BI just be the BI team? Why does it? Yeah.
Okay, so that's
why
my
can't
point.
Say, where does BI live?
Yeah,
in
it lives
BI?
everywhere.
It lives in business intelligence.
Yeah.
That's where business,
So
because data.
I think you're on a point there, Tommy, because I believe like a BI used to be a solely IT function because all we had was like SQL servers, and
Right.
someone controlled them and had to manage them, and so we had a SQL DBA and we had a SQL person. But
and it wasn't for BI.
Correct. And so now we have this Excel tool that is very agile for the business people. And then, oh, by the way, hey, now we have this really cool Power BI tool that's now adding to this really rich spectrum of tooling that we have. And so now any user, because you can go get it for free, any user can sit down and start shaping data and pulling it together. I think this, Excel and Power Query and the analysis services engine that you're getting in Power BI, this to me is the game changing the game change that's happening in the industry, because now you have given tools that would traditionally have been solely IT, you're giving them to everyone. Everyone can go get this stuff, and I think that's the change we're seeing.
Everyone with a asterisk. So
everyone with a star. Well, I mean, technically, technically, you on any computer you can go download Power BI desktop and you can go use it.
Yes.
When you start sharing, then when you start wanting to get licensing stuff, but like at the end of the day,
it gives me anxiety when you data. Everyone gets it. You're like, yes.
But that's also also part of your roadmap, though, right? So like everyone can go download desktop unless your IT group has it locked down. so everyone can start exploring and doing things. And frankly, realistically, right? People could go on their home machines and start downloading desktop and doing things. But
yeah, that's not part of my roadmap.
not
but...
part of my roadmap either. But it's the availability. I think to me, this is like why this is so important, is because we now have this really awesome tool that everyone can get at, and it's accessible to me now. I was not an IT individual. I did not come to the IT space. I was the business. I would purely see on business.
Right.
And this tool made sense to me. I could figure it out, and I'm like, I pushed way hard into it because I'm like, this is going to change how companies think.
Well, the other part too with that, when we say is it IT or user, like if you asked someone 10 years ago, honestly, even 5 years ago, we need an application that it connects all of our data sources that our business can use. That had to live in IT because someone actually had to develop it from the ground up.
Mm-hmm.
To your point,
Yeah.
if I have a Power Apps license and I can just connect, I can just add my credentials, I can now sync that together. So it eliminates that, like you said, that wall. So that's not IT though. Like, because I'm building the report or managing the data set. I'm not managing the data set for like our like Exchange, 2016.
Yeah. Well, and
that's what SQL was used for.
Well, and you had to hire an IT or person, right, to go install the software, to put the SQL in the machine, learn how to do that, right? Today, there is a business-facing tool called SharePoint where you can make a list in that you can connect to a Power App,
right?
And you can drop it into Power BI. I've made my own, let's call it mini database from SharePoint, Power Apps, and Power BI. I've made this low no code solution that I can just use right now, and to me it's like super cool. Although, and I would also say too, this can also be super dangerous because now we can have these citizen developers, and I think that's like a very common term. Maybe we should define that too.
Yeah.
But you can have citizen developers that are making things that may or may not conflict with what IT is already producing. And so I think in here becomes like our challenge, right? I'll pose another question. Do you think we can mature a user data set into an IT-based data set?
So I just want to make sure I understood what you just described there. So you're building ETL systems off source data systems to build user databases in SharePoint?
Well, I'm just saying the capability is there. So IT doesn't require.
There's
I'm
a
just
solution.
saying.
So how is that different than Access Database Hell?
Oh, I'm not saying it's any different at all. I'm not saying it's the best way to do things.
So is that what you're creating nowadays?
I'm just saying. I'm just saying it's possible. I think more of the point is
it's used more than no. So
I mean, Tommy makes Power Apps, and that's as shadow IT as it gets.
Microsoft promotes SharePoint Lists, especially if you're using the Power Platform.
Yes.
Let's not be mistaken. If you want to see a sample, the basis and advanced uses of Power Apps from Microsoft's official documentation, they are using SharePoint, and my goodness, have they made that integration
easy,
excellent?
Yeah,
because they know the ease of that, in a sense, that user side where, let's say you need additional records, you probably, since you're not IT, this is not IT, you can't just create a table in SQL. I guess what you can do, you can create a list in SharePoint.
So this is still a user data set in my mind, right?
Oh yeah, totally, 100%.
This sort of thing is where that graduation from a user data set into an IT-led one is more challenging, or maybe easier, right? Because there's well-defined ETL pipelines to extract data from source systems, and because it's just a matter of shifting that into the enterprise space. Interesting.
So let me argue this, because you're basically saying it's a user data set, or it's a user solution, or an IT solution based on the data source.
Sorry,
I disagree with that.
I'm listening to Nico on LinkedIn.
I'm not saying it has any the data sets, how they're constructed, and the source systems. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All of that combined is where I'm bucketing things.
Well, and so what I would say though is, like, there's got to be goals. So this is where I love some of the Melissa's coach training, and anyone who's working in Power BI at admin level at all, you have to go to this training. It's absolutely incredible. So one of the things she talks about is what are the requirements to push something out of a user-based data set into an IT-based. There's thresholds. Like it's got to be vetted. There's no Excel as data sources. It's got to be a legit table that's in some sort of database.
One of those no C users / M Carlo.
Exactly. There's no C user in any of the files because there's not local files being used. And you're looking at going one of those requirements. Again, this is an organization decision, but one of your decisions could be nothing that's IT based can be stuck in SharePoint. So you can say we need a more formal process beyond that. Again, it's an organizational decision, but be mindful. When you make those decisions, it's going to cost you maybe more to develop that.
Okay, Tommy.
So when we're saying based on
SharePoint for life,
SharePoint for life, man. Yeah, Ted. I would love to hear what Ted Patterson has to say. But think of SharePoint 10 years ago when it was literally like SharePoint server. Was that user? No, that was IT. So it's obviously more accessible now. But just because anyone can create a SharePoint list does not mean that that's a by default user. If that's adopted by and I'm not going to say the IT, I'm going to say the BI team from now on because that's just what it is.
Mm-hmm.
If that's adopted part of the BI team's, like let's say like our references or our user roles or whatever is stored in SharePoint because it's using the Power Platform and it's using a reporting, that's absolutely part of the BI, the global solution, not a user solution. Now, if a random person just creates a SharePoint list and uses it for their own gain, that's completely different. But part of this too, and this may even get to data flows too. SharePoint list, manages some dimensional tables that's using Power Platform, which is using reporting, creating a data flow off that's using our data sets now. So let's introduce data flows into here too, because you can't say that that data flows are only user. If it's adopted by the BI team, my gosh,
Seth's burning up.
No, let me just say this, and then I'll let you I'll let you spit some fire. But if it's adopted and documented by the BI team and saying this is basically part of our structure and the workflow, and it's accepted, then it's absolutely part of the global solution. Maybe, and it could be better if it's in SQL, but it doesn't have to live in SQL.
I'm on Tommy's side on this one. I think, and the reason I say this is because I think there's enough controls in SharePoint to lock people out, to make sure that it's not like you can start it there. It has good data structure. Honestly, I would prefer connecting to SharePoint lists over Excel sheets any day because at least I can do some data validation as I input the data. So I really like that part. So there's a couple really big wins. You can also say not everyone can edit that information, or if you are editing information, you can make it be done in a Power App. So there's some really good things about it. And if at the end of the day, again, I don't know if this is true or not, but at the end of the day, the Dynamics 365 thing, whatever that engine is, that's running Dataverse, right? It's a bunch of files in storage somewhere or items that Microsoft is able to quickly query across. I have a feeling that SharePoint lists are basically the same thing. It's kind of using the same infrastructure for that as well. So it's built on top of a very robust, I think, and sustainable system. There are data volume limits because I do know, like, if you get to SharePoint lists that are extremely long, you're going to have problems. So, like, it's not ideal, but I think you could adopt part of it as part of your IT data sets. All right, let's let Seth spew some fire.
I think organizational size dictates some of this.
I can agree with that.
I think the key point that's also being made in some of the YouTube chat is documentation and business process flow. Like, so treat those processes and data sets and things like the data systems, right? It's got to be part of an architecture somewhere so that if transition or transformation is needed into larger systems or different formats, whatever, it can be done. That's one of the bigger challenges, I think, around some of the business ad hoc ways in which these ETL processes are created. And also part of my problems around data flows is visibility, right? From that larger work. The challenge this introduces is actually funny. now that you guys are talking, right? Because business tools are becoming so powerful,
yes,
that IT professionals may not know them,
yes,
but they're part of an architecture,
yeah,
right?
Right.
So the
Ooh,
reason
this
I
is
go
good.
the reason I'm like, is
Yeah.
because you're introducing new things that are in Power Platform, say,
Yeah.
right, or that are supporting business very effectively, or it could be a train wreck, right?
Yep.
In ways that graduation is more challenging if it needs to happen, but at the same time it's harder for some of the IT folks to understand how that all knits together, as well as like how you would transform it or shape it into the larger adoption frameworks, right? Like, can I use your SharePoint site for, marketing, or is it only the sales?
Yes.
Yes. So you're siloing that data into systems, as opposed to typically in that IT or enterprise engineer layer, right? All the data is together. A lot of time we try to bring it together so that we can shape, mold, and shoot out models that are effectively crossing bounds of the organization, as opposed to being siloed or put in different areas. If you're combining and compiling that information into your SharePoint and data flows, and I'm not saying that's wrong.
Yeah.
But
I
think it's the documentation, the process flow, like the understanding that you're treating it like an engineered corporate thing.
Yes.
And that's where maybe some of the think like the business, act like IT. You're acting like
Right.
IT in some respects, because you now get toys that allow you to scale and do a lot more with across the organization than you were before.
Dude, there's
one thing too.
there's hold on, pause real
You're
quick.
smirking.
Yeah.
I'm laughing because there are some funny comments coming out on LinkedIn right now
that we can't see. Thanks.
Well, you could go to the LinkedIn page. You can read them yourself.
Yeah, just you have to create a like a central area where like 500 comment pop-up windows are.
Nico is hilarious, and he's been dropping a couple really fun ones. So I'll throw some of his funny comments in here. And he goes, one of his comments was, "No, don't start talking about D365." And then he goes on to comment, "Have you pulled 13,000 tables from the finance and operations database in order to get data together? It's slow." And he's like, "Don't even go there." I'm totally with you, Nico. I get it. Like, I'm not saying this is probably the best solution. And when you see stuff like that and it gets so hard, now you're looking at like, maybe we are using, Dataverse and trying to synchronize that data and build and starting consolidating these 13,000 tables down. To me, like, the D365 environment is good for operational things, but it is just that. It's an operational system, and it is not intended for reporting. So you have to have an initiative from your organization to kind of push into a data warehouse where you can do these kind of things. But anyways, Nico's just cracking me up. He also says one last thing here. He goes, looking forward to 2024, the SharePoint will now be the access database of the future. That'll be the running joke. Oh, you put it in SharePoint. No, we've got so many SharePoint sites. It's ridiculous now.
and listen, I completely see the one difference with Share. And again, okay, so IT is not what IT used to be, because again, there's, to your point, Seth, there's so many products now that are so powerful that I could literally today, or a random user can create an entire infrastructure of dimensional tables in SharePoint without anyone knowing.
Correct.
Right. So that's possible.
You can totally
but whether it gets adopted into the greater solution is the difference. Just because I can create something in SharePoint, or any user can, doesn't mean that that's going to be adopted part of the solution.
Yep.
Now, I will say too that I think each data source, depending on the use, has a purpose. Like, you shouldn't be creating your facts in SharePoint. That's a terrible idea. And so, like, if you have user inputting, like, total sales 5,000, and they're inputting that, that's not a BI, part of the IT kind of source.
Yeah.
So, and obviously, I think there are times too, like kind of what Microsoft did, where they're deleting SharePoint sites, where maybe someone in IT is going, "Hey, what's this sub site?"
Delete.
So let me delete, and all. Yeah.
And everyone's like freaking out, like, my reports are gone. What's going on?
Right. But again,
we're doing SharePoint cleanup.
But to me, this is more of the difference is not, and just because IT wouldn't know that, we have to separate IT and BI now. I think it is weird at that point where they are two separate entities. They work together.
I would agree with that, and I would say, I think I'm going to add to your definition just slightly and see if you agree with me. I think the BI so data has let me so many thoughts. Let me settle down my brain here a little bit.
Before you say that, data before used to be information. That's why it was part of information technology.
Yes, agreed. But I think that there's a challenge now that we're seeing is there is now so much data. Your IT team would have to be massive, and so you can't expect your IT team to come in and do like there's a whole bunch of data that's running your company that is managed, owned, manipulated, people in Excel doing things with data, but the data volumes that your organization needs to use is ever increasing. Like in the next, I don't know, I don't remember the statistic. I'll have to go look this up. I think I've quoted it many times, and I don't even know what the actual data is. Like in the next 5 years or 10 years, we're going to make more data than has been created for the entirety of all computers have been around. Like data is exponentially increasing. So like I think what we're seeing now is Microsoft, and particularly, well, Microsoft, one of the companies, but other companies too, are heavily pushing for tools and things to be made that give more people access to that information. So we're seeing a shifting trend where before, most of the tooling was centered around information technology. It was the IT team. And now we're seeing the role of IT kind of shift. And so now IT is now not necessarily building the reports for the business, because it took a lot of effort to get that to happen. I think the tooling is getting so efficient for us, we're able to then disseminate some of that creation of these reports and data sets and things to a broader portion of the organization. And so now the challenge for IT has become, well, now it's not about us building the reports. It's more about us integrating with people who are building the reports. And we need to focus on building and providing secure and regular access to the data. To me, that's where I think IT's role is moving into, is how do we give IT individuals more power and control to know who's using what data? How do we build better data sets? Taking inventory across all the data sets and figuring out which ones need to be promoted into something that's governed by a bigger team.
I think that sprawls the BI team, right? I think that it sprawls the engineer team too far.
Okay.
What I would suggest is, like, what's interesting and probably another topic is, are we really creating better solutions for business users, or are we just creating bigger issues because they're playing with more data? Right.
Okay.
Are they IT folks? Are they thinking in the technical space when they're building things? Well, you'd have to be to some degree, right?
Yeah.
Or to Tommy's point, you have teams that understand how to build these things within these new business objects.
Yeah.
I guess where I want to move is, like, we've talked a lot about, like, the intricate layers of user to IT and these areas, but how do we endorse? And I think what you're bringing up is that endorsement path, where a user data set is, they haven't done anything. I would say the threshold of using a business realm like SharePoint, you're scaling into like an ETL pattern that many people may be using, your sourcing system, maybe that's promoted. But then how do you get from a promoted to a certified data set? And this is where, Tommy, the org size, maybe, there can be a certification, but I'm thinking about, like, now I want to take this business built thing and put it into a wider organization. And I think there is a key step thing in Matthew Roach's, like, ladder, right? And that's really where within there is a preparation phase, right? And that's where these teams start working together, where that team needs to understand what the promoted set looks like. How is the data being sourced? What are the transformations that are happening? How do we transition that into an enterprise level system that we then throw through QA, vet, and then ultimately certify, right? And I think that's where you make sure documentation exists. You're making sure that the ETL patterns are following the same standards that you have, for the organization. You vet the stuff over and over, and then you can get into this certification land.
So if we're speaking in the BI realm, especially when it comes to endorsed and certified data sets, we're adding another layer now besides just the data sources. You're adding that model of what are the official reference, dimensions and hierarchies. But more importantly, you're adding in the metrics. You're adding in the KPIs, the calculations to say this data set's going to define what sales are. This data set's going to define what net new customers are.
Yep.
Right. Because so that's what really is probably I don't want to say the bigger focus of like vetting something to be a certified data set, but that's really more or less when someone's going to say this is a certified data set as a user, like they're not going to go, oh, I wonder what the data sources are. They're going to say this is going to provide me accurate information and official information that I will know that our net new customers is 24 million, right? And I can get it from this report, or in a sense this data set. That to me is kind of what that role of that certified data set is. Obviously there's secondary roles in terms of like people connecting to it and building reports off of it. But to say something in Power BI certified is really the focus on the metrics now and the business rules and the logic, which again, to go back to, is this IT or user, it's BI, because BI is going to have to work with vetting the data sources, but also vetting the businesses to understand that we're calculating this correctly.
Yeah. No, I think what we're seeing, again, I would highly recommend the ability here for when people are talking about this, or particularly when they're looking at this situation. Again, I can't recommend enough. Melissa Coates is talking about all these things. Like this is the stuff that she goes through. How do you certify things? What's the checklist? What do we do? How do we fix this stuff so that we have a process? And I think to me the biggest point here, your organization, whether it's small or large, just needs a process, something you can follow. And I think particularly as you look from like this, we're talking about user-based data sets, ones that are made just by users, that level of organization, you're going to have it. You have to plan for both ends of the spectrum. You're going to have IT-based data sets, and you're going to have data sets at the user level. I think the important thing is acknowledge you're going to get both of them, but just have a plan or a process to say, here's some thresholds we need you to make sure that you can promote your data set. Here's some thresholds you need to meet or make so you can be a certified data set. I think to your point, Tommy, you're squarely in the space of like documentation and good data sets and being like the story of truth. I think that's an aspirational part to a lot of organizations. And I don't think a lot of organizations have the rigor or the dedication to get to that to get there yet, but they're working towards it, right? So I think there's a lot of again, this stuff is not easy. It takes a lot of work and effort, and pipelines break down, and even in the IT space, stuff fails, and you've got to figure out how to recover. So there's a lot of considerations, and again, SLAs. I think an SLA is a big portion for me of this conversation. Is if Michael builds a report and it's down for 2 days, well, it's Michael's report. I own it. I owned it, right? So people are gonna go tap me in the shoulder and be like, "Hey, Mike, your report's down. But did I offer an SLA to it? No. And I'll get to it when I get to it. Like I'll get back in, I'll fix it, and okay, we're done. But on the other hand, you go to the IT space and there's people relying on that data coming out. That SLA is like, hey, 9 to 5, this thing better be up.
Yeah, it's a good
no
point.
question. And I think for me, a big deciding factor of what, if we're talking user data sets versus IT data sets, is what is the SLA that you're doing between those two different areas?
I still think, I'm really struggling when we just say IT, because I think it's just in 5 years, BI.
We'll come up with a new name for it then.
That's fine. Remember, words have meanings, but in 5 years, BI, I think you're going to see 50% of companies have a chief data officer, and with that, you're probably going to have like BI be really its own team or department that's established at companies. I really do believe that. I think it's only a matter of time.
And to say like the SLAs, the shift's already happening. It's data as an asset
already happening.
Yeah.
So I'll know it's established because like if you look for like, hey, what does the help desk template look like in for BI? There is none. Just use service or use IT, right? But it does not reflect it. An IT help desk does not reflect a BI team's roles.
Yeah, I was astounded to see a comment from one of our regular listeners that they didn't have a chief data officer in an org their size. Blows my mind.
Well, I think a CDO is a little bit hard. Like the definition of what a CDO does If you go like Google and like look up what CDOs do, people try and throw a lot of stuff on a CDO, a lot of things that are in there. And I could totally see like companies aren't quite ready yet to make out or carve out a C-level position for just data, because there's like a couple things that I mean, that's a whole nother topic, is like, what is a CDO? Because it could be talking about like data governance, it could be talking about data security, like, and then, you know, how do we do, like, what are your policies about when you have a data breach? It's not if, it's when. Does that guy own it or not? Like, what does that look like? So I think there's a lot of like, does the CDO determine your technology stack, or is that something with the CTO? Because now you have another guy who's kind of in that place. So I think the general feel for me is, I think the industry is trying to still feel out what really does a CDO mean at this point. I think more companies are putting a priority on their data. I think that's something I can say.
Yeah, going back, I do love the idea with the SLAs though, in terms of for a certified data set, right?
Agreed.
To say that these are live.
Yep.
Because that's a huge part of this too, is saying like, because again, it's not just we're certifying the data sources, is these data sets are also reporting up to corporate or executive level. And this is what's being established either for external communication for our numbers, or what, you know, your CEO is looking at to say, what are our official, you know, where are we at? That should be what a certified data set is.
I agree. Yeah, it's a super good topic. There's a lot of chatter actually happening on YouTube. So a lot about, you know, what is IT? A lot of people are disagreeing with maybe not disagreeing. They're having words around.
Come at me.
Are you? No. Actually, Tommy, I think they're agreeing with you. Honestly, I think they're talking about, like, you know, what IT is and what its role is and how that's working. And so, like, we say IT defined data set. I think a lot of people are like, we don't see it as IT defined data sets. It's I don't know the term for it. Maybe there's a word out there that people have coined that I don't know of yet, but there is this governed data sets. Maybe I'll use it like that, right? It's that certified level of data set things, and it doesn't have to be driven directly from IT. You know, we're thinking about, you know, there's like two parts to IT. There's information management, and then there's infrastructure and technology management. And what I think I'm seeing is the information side of that IT traditional lens is now maybe being redistributed to more people. And so now you're seeing what some team needs to pick that up, and that's where you're seeing, like, you know, the CDO kind of picking up that slack. There's now a new term, a BI team. That's now,
think about it this way, right? Like the IT, you know, or the CTO, the chief technology officer, right? Infrastructure, man. Like, the only reason information or, you know, IT got the, you know, the bad name from organizations, from the business, was because it was the only place data came from, and it took forever for those teams to get you what you needed in terms of data.
Yes.
But in the spectrum of like, where does that role fit? It's in making sure all of the infrastructure, support, security, all of that is making sense. And just by nature, that's where the data of the systems of your production systems live. And it was the only place data was accessible.
Right.
But in today's world, like, analysis services, really, like, when you started shifting away from just storage of data to using data, and we're in this whole different realm now where not only are these systems built and can we consume massive amounts of data, those systems are in the hands of business now.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So we're talking about analysis, analytics, business intelligence. What are we doing with that data? That's not the chief technology officer. That's a CDO, because all of this stuff is happening in your organization that has nothing to do with IT.
Yes.
Right. It's not storing production system data. It's, what are we doing with it? What is the what are we now, what ecosystems are we building around that? Because are you building a data culture? And it's this side of that conversation that has to be managed, that has to be like, have a controlling person, and that is the CDO, that is the chief data officer, in my mind. And more, right? You can't build all of this ecosystem on somebody who knows infrastructure, support, or security or making, like, their priorities are so wildly different in my mind.
Dude, you're getting mad praises, Seth, on the YouTubes for this one. So everyone's commenting like Seth's right on. Good point. So they
and it's
win for Seth.
It's a hybrid role. I mean, and that too with the people who are working in it, not just like everyone, let's say from the CDO down.
Yeah.
It's a hybrid role because to your point, Seth, and that's perfect. When did this shift happen? It's when, again, data became less about information or storing information and into actually something applicable and something that was action based. And that was when analysis server, that was when we had, obviously our introduction to user led reports, or again, the platform that we have now. But this data team again is hybrid, where they have to understand obviously the model where the data is coming from and certify it, but they are working so heavily with the business to understand or improve their processes, where you have this team coming together where they can't build anything. Listen, they can't build something actionable for a business unless the business has a good process and has their own objectives and baselines. There's nothing they can do for them. So they have to be an active role in that department or that, in that team to say, what are your objectives? And we'll build around that. Or we're going to help you build that. So that's, again, not IT. That's this data team.
Agreed. Oh man, this is so good.
I go off a rant on that, but
well, I think this is actually kind of a good breaking point. I think we've talked out a lot about the IT, or we'll call it like the BI governed data sets. I'm going to change the term here. Actually, we should retroactively.
It took me 34 episodes to get you guys finally using that, but we're finally there.
We'll say governed data sets versus user data sets. Let's change the term, because I think that's actually more. After talking through this, I feel like that's much more appropriate. It's not about the infrastructure technology. It's more about governing the data and being able to trust it. So with that, we love having the podcast. We thank all of you for listening. We really, really appreciate it. Our favor, or if you like this content, if you find that this is adding value to you, or you're enjoying it, you're maybe going on a walk and you laugh or try to argue with us while you're listening to it on your podcast or your device, please do us a favor. Share the link, share this podcast with someone else that you think might find value from it as well. We really appreciate you listening. We just do this because we like having fun and we like arguing with each other about who's right about data sets, I guess. Not many people do this, but if you like to argue about data sets too, thank you for participating. Tommy, where can we find the podcast?
You can find the podcast anywhere it's available: Apple, Spotify. Also, we do live streams every Tuesday and Thursday on pretty much any social media platform. Join the conversation. You can submit a mailbag by going to the comment on YouTube or go to the Power BI Tips website. We look at the mailbag. We look at your guys' question. We actually have one coming up, I believe, next week or in 2 weeks on someone's, actually, was it Average Nerd Dad or Working on Data?
Yep, it was. So, I think it was.
Yeah, it was.
So we solicit
stuff. Yeah.
We solicit the community for ideas. So please send us your ideas. Put them in the chat window. We try and capture all of them as much as we possibly can, and we use them and we add them into our library of things we'll argue about.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much. We'll see you next week.